how do we get cloud and application security right, starting from the first line of the code. I'm Inoon Kosika, running product management and one of the co-founders here at Wiz, and I'm honored to have with me Bernd Bauer that will join us for a panel after this short session. Bernd leads protection services at Siemens, and we will talk about the journey together. So, without further ado, a bit about the company. Wiz is the largest cybersecurity company to date. We are operating with almost 50% of the Fortune 100 customers, alongside thousands of other customers that are basically leveraging Wiz in order to secure their cloud environments and their cloud development processes. And basically, taking the story, maybe before we go ahead, by a show of hand, how many of you are Wiz customers today? Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for being customers. And you probably know the story of how did we actually start. When we started Wiz, we really looked at the transformation to cloud, and we realized that actually every customer that moves to cloud has three main challenges. The first challenge is around the new technologies, the new environments that are being brought, and how do we gain visibility? The most recent example is obviously AI. As security teams, we are very interested in who is using AI, where, by which teams, and we need that visibility to know exactly what they're using so we can secure them properly. The second thing is that continuously, as we adopt new technologies, there are new risks and new threats that we need to account for. But it's not only about finding all of the risks. It's actually about prioritizing them in a way that we can ingest and actually bring it in a way that is prioritized for the development teams to act upon. And the third pillar is actually embracing the new ownership model in cloud, in basically ingraining security in how we develop cloud applications so we can get better and better and more secure right at the start. And this is where we're going to focus a lot in this session. When we basically started, and we've seen many customers, and we'll talk about it with Bernd from Siemens, about the journey into cloud security and what we call the cloud operating model, we basically realized that there are maturity levels that allow us to move from one step to the other. The first step is actually establishing democratized security across the board. And it starts with three phases: gaining visibility to the environment, prioritizing risks, and then democratizing the risks to the teams, to the development teams, the business units, so we can share responsibility over the security of our cloud applications. And the way we do it at Wiz is really unique. First, we have an API-only agentless connector to all of the cloud platforms you may use, AWS alongside others, Kubernetes as well. And it allows us to analyze agentlessly all of the layers of the cloud, from the orchestration layer, the cloud layer, workloads, serverless, VMs, container images. And we're not only scanning the environment, we're actually putting it into a graph view that allows us to analyze the architecture. And on top of this architecture, we are also scanning for many different findings. For instance, vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, exposures, AI risks, data, sensitive data, and we layer everything into that graph. The reason that we put everything in a single location, single data model, is because we can then ask higher level questions about how all of these actually interact together. How do we actually create attack path by combining different findings, and how do we prioritize it based on the actual impact, possible impact to the environment? And that's what we're doing with Wiz. And I'll give you one quick example. We call these attack paths sometimes toxic combinations, because it's not about that one vulnerability that will get you compromised. It's actually about a combination of issues that will actually have that impact. And when we think about the tools, they are very siloed today, and only by combining them to one, we are able to take these insights and make them actionable. So we all run a CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, in order to find cloud misconfigurations, for instance, an exposed container. We run vulnerability scanners. So we basically can find vulnerabilities in the containers. We run identity analysis, who has access to what, so we know which permissions are granted, and then we can scan for data. But when we look at them just in a siloed way, they don't mean much. But when we put everything together, and this is exactly what we're doing through the graph, we're actually able to tie this together, and this becomes a toxic combination because now we have an internet-facing container that is vulnerable and has access to sensitive data in our environment. And this is exactly the type of findings, of risks, that we can use to start our cloud security journey. They are actionable, they are clear. And when you take it into our words of vulnerability management, this is actually what gives us the ability to focus and taking what would have been huge list of hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities and actually get to the only handful resources that are in actual risk right now, and we need to start remediating from there because they carry the most risk in the environment. And this is basically the funnel we can create on any type of scanning, whether it's vulnerabilities, secrets, misconfigurations, really identifying what are the key ones we need to remediate. When we have this level of prioritization, then magic happens. Because we can take these findings, these toxic combinations, and share them directly, not mediated. You don't need security analysts going over them. You can basically show these findings to your development teams. And the response is amazing. Every time they see this, the question is, how did you find it? It's so correlated. And we were able to correlate sometimes dozens of different configurations into finding them. And this creates an action, because now we understand not only that there is a vulnerability, but we understand why we need to actually act upon it. And we can provide remediation guidance when they see it, so they can action it. And basically, the ability to democratize access relies first on the ability to really attribute ownership. So you can think about your cloud environment as a whole, but then you can split it between business units, application teams, and you can assign ownership, who owns what. So when you see a risk tied to a resource, you know exactly how to route it to the right team so they can remediate it. And more than this, more than remediating them one by one, you offer the teams, who are development teams, so they love doing this, the ability to automate the workflows. And they can automate it into their own workflows. We don't need one workflow for the entire organization. Maybe every business unit have kind of a different workflow. And they can actually create these automations so they can be more and more efficient when responding to these risks. And what we have found out, that after we connect to a cloud environment, the goal, the baseline we set is let's fix all of the zero criticals. A critical in Wiz is an issue that represents an actual potential attack. So let's remove these critical risks together as a team. And we democratize the access, and we get to this level of baseline that we say, you know what? We are now on the zero criticals. And actually, we're tracking how many of Wiz customers are zero critical. And the numbers keep going higher and higher. We are almost at 45% now of zero criticals. This means that Wiz customers are actually adopting a baseline of removing critical risks from the environment. And I want to show you one example of why it's so important to be zero critical. And it's a story from last month. There was a PAN-OS critical RCE vulnerability. And I'll give you the timeline. November 8th, we get initial indications from the vendor saying that there is a potential RCE. November 14th, we get a confirmation from the vendor that there is a zero-day exploitation. And November 18th is when we publish the CVEs. Guess what happens in November 19th? Public exploits are already available, and threat actors start to automate exploitation across the internet. If you have an exposed asset, it gets compromised. And we are seeing the day after the exploits are published, already compromised indications from the threat intel. So if we look at this, we have very few days from the moment a new risk, a new threat is introduced to the environment until that we can actually reduce the risk before it becomes an actual threat. And this is exactly what we want to achieve with zero criticals. The ability to identify this and move from zero-day vulnerability to zero-day response. And through Wiz, we're able to protect your cloud environments using two really important tools. One, the agentless scan of your environment can identify what are all these vulnerabilities, where do you have impacted assets. And the second thing we can do is actually test and validate which ones are actually exposed to the outside world. So they are at immediate risk. And when you combine these together, we're able to find the malware that is installed, the vulnerabilities, and any misconfigurations that are leading to that exposure. And this is how it looks like in the graph. you can literally see this in your environment and send it to the team so they can start remediating. And the zero-day response is a real thing. It's the ability to say, and this is what happened in Wiz side. Basically, November 9th, a day after the first indication, customers of Wiz already had the opportunity to identify all of the vulnerable assets in their environment. By the way, 24% of all cloud environments. And more than this, we were able to say which ones out of these are at immediate risk, 7%. These are actually assets that would be compromised the moment the public exploit is available. So this is what we've published, and we have this threat center that allows customers to identify what's the impact on their environment and take an immediate action. And just tying it to the zero-day, like how do we get to zero criticals? When you are zero critical, actually every deviation becomes an issue that your teams would address. And you're using the zero critical baseline as a way to drive an action. So when you have a real threat, you can immediately remove it from your environment before it becomes a breach. And November 22nd, we had the indicator of compromise to Wiz. We are already able to identify active exploitations of these devices, these virtual appliances, and we notify customers that were actually breached. So this is why zero criticals is so important, and this is a live example from last month. Once you have established zero criticals, and this is where we are seeing huge efficiency benefits for the organization, we can start really shifting to the left. We call it basically develop securely, getting guardrails in place. And in order to understand the importance of shifting left in the cloud, we have to realize that code and cloud are becoming one. The more we go into cloud-native technologies, the more they become the same thing. Code is being written, then it's being deployed through our pipelines to different environments, but the code is representative of the actual applications we have in the cloud. And more than this, in the past, code actually controlled the applicative layer. But today, when you think about the code, it actually determines everything in your environment. It determines the application, but also it determines the network configurations, the operating, the compute that you use, the orchestration layer, everything is now infrastructure as code. In the past, you had infrastructure teams defining them manually. Today, the more cloud native you become, it's actually part of your code. So a larger portion of your cloud environment, an ever-growing portion, is now part of your code base, actually defined by your code base. So any change to the code base becomes an impact, immediate downstream impact to your cloud. And this is a problem. Because of, let's say, historical reasons, we still think in silos. So in order to scan code, these tools historically evolved from SAST and DAST that looked only at code. When we looked at the CI/CD and the pipeline, we are scanning, in the past, ISC, infrastructure as code scanners, container image scanners. In the cloud, you have the Synapse, the CSPMs, we evolved to scan the cloud, and runtime evolved from agents. But each one operates in a complete silo. And when each of these tools find findings or risks, they basically send them to the development teams, and we are actually not helping them by bombarding them with more and more findings that are in fact the same findings, but from different parts of the pipeline. And this obviously creates no prioritization, no ability to really action, and it creates a lot of noise for the application owners to decide where do we start from? How do we get better and better? And at Wiz, we really wanted to tackle this. And before we go to this, I really want to show you another example from the research team at Wiz that shows that while we are still operating in silos, threat actors are already one step ahead, and they are moving horizontally. And this is a real example. Let's start from the beginning. Sorry, it went ahead. OK, so basically, a threat actor can compromise a database using a database vulnerability. Through that vulnerability, they can basically run an RCE on the machine, pulling container registry keys, because this database runs in a container. That threat actors can now go to the registry, pull all of the containers, scan the images, and then we find a key. The key provides us access to a CI/CD tool. The next step is taking the key, logging in into the internal CI/CD server, And basically, we find many artifacts that are being pulled into the cloud environment. So the next thing we do, we pull the artifacts, we infect them with malware, we ship it back to the CI/CD server, and then guess what happens? This is basically propagating to the entire cloud environment. And that's a real research on a cloud platform that we released a year and a half ago, that you can see how we can move laterally in order to get to the cloud environments. And we have to be able to identify this and tackle it. So in general, from both blue perspective, so our teams and our ability to respond effectively to risk, and from the red perspective, so from the threat landscape, we have to transition our thinking from what we call vertical security, that is siloed, and actually one tool per phase in the development lifecycle, to a position where we have something we call horizontal security, that we have a single tool that can actually cover every step of the cloud application, run the same scanner, run the same policy, and correlate the findings and provide the context. So this is exactly what we've done with WizCode. WizCode, we've launched the product a quarter ago. It allows you to connect to your code repositories like GitLab, GitHub, Azure DevOps, and then it allows us to scan. The first thing that we did is actually showing you context. If you connect to a repo, how can we correlate that repo to your cloud environment? How do you know that this repo is related to that container image? We call it cloud to code. So the ability to provide cloud context to the actual code base. Second thing, we took all of the scanners that we run in the cloud, and we repackaged them so we can scan them directly in the code. So thinking about SCA, namely vulnerability scanning for open source components, SBOM, secret scanning, data scanning, malware scanning, configuration scanning of infrastructure as code. So we can harmonize the policy across cloud and code. And the other thing we have added, taking the concept of CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, and extending it to SDLC security posture. So we wrote configuration checks on your GitLabs, making sure your repos are configured correctly. And by this, we are extending the concept of cloud security posture to cloud and pipeline and development lifecycle security posture. We are also able to ingest additional findings from third-party tools. We launched an integration with Checkmarks and many others to ingest your SAST and DAST so we can layer them in a single pane of glass. And then we basically take the scanners and we are able to write policies that are implemented as guardrails in the IDE, in the CI/CD, in the code repositories as part of the PR process where we can provide auto fixes. Now, this is what we've released, and I want to take the time to show you a bit more of how it looks like from an experience perspective for a team that has now consolidated the two. First, all of the reporting in your environment is now unified. When you look at your vulnerability report, you can see the toggle between cloud and code. You can ask, where are all the exploitable vulnerabilities running in my cloud right now that I should patch? And a single toggle will actually show you which ones actually sourced in your own code. And instead of fixing these vulnerabilities in the cloud, you can now go and fix the source. And this ability to unify completely reporting is not only for vulnerability management. It's actually for SBOM. Let's say you are looking for one specific component. Who is using this library, this package? You have one toggle that shows you all of the instances in the cloud versus all the instances in the code. Secret scanning. Everything in Wiz is now unified across cloud and code together. How is it helping us to be better and better? And this is where we implement the code to cloud concept in order to extend the concept of the graph and the way we prioritize and add context to every single finding in your environment. So the first phase is what we covered earlier, being able to analyze your cloud in order to find toxic combination. A note about this one. Last year, we launched the Wiz Runtime Sensor. The runtime sensor is actually a small agent, eBPF-based, that you can run on top of your cloud workloads, and it provides us an option. It's optional, but it provides us an additional intelligence about what's actually in use. What threats do we see? And this is something that we can layer also into the risk assessment. So now we can ask not only which vulnerabilities exist in the container, but we can actually ask through the sensor signal which ones are actually loaded right now, are in use. So you see the power of this. Currently loaded in use vulnerable component that is internet facing. Great, that's exactly what we need to address. Next, cloud to code graph. We're actually taking the reverse path. And from a container image, for instance, we can see which registries has this container image, where it was pulled from. We can see which repo actually built that container image. And we create this full lineage, so we can now see that the same vulnerability, we found it when we scanned the registry, we found it when we scanned the repo, and now we can say that all of these findings are actually the same instance of the, like different instances of the same vulnerability. And we take this, and then the third pillar is really security of the code itself. So when we think about security of the code, we're able to extend the graph and say, and you know what? The repo in which the code resides is actually public, or it has misconfigurations on the branch, or here are all the users that can actually access this, or vice versa, here is the exact developer that committed this code. So we provide additional context by analyzing the repos, the VCS themselves. Now, when we have this, magic happens because you can transition what would have been a vulnerability in the cloud that now we need to start a triage process, and we can obviate the triage process and point directly to the code that you need to fix. So how does it look like? First, we have the issue. You click on the response tab. We actually move, and we have a new construct that shows you cloud to code mapping. We actually guide the developers, and instead of telling them, here is something you need to, you have a problem in your cloud, figure out how to fix it, when we know that the problem isn't sourced from the cloud, it's actually sourced at the code, we can point them to the right direction. But it's not only pointing them. We can now actually generate a PR directly from Wiz. So you just need to click, we open a PR, and they can basically add it to their code base, redeploy, and it's patched, vulnerability gone. And this is how we can close the loop, and we can pivot from what used to be cloud word to code word, and we can make our development teams orders of magnitude more efficient when responding to these threats. So this is when we respond efficiently to cloud risks that are found already. The other end of it is actually how do we become better and better by actually putting in guardrails to prevent these mistakes in the first place. So you can take these policies and you can actually implement them at the developer IDE and in the PR process. These two are actually happening as we code, so while we code the actual application. And then we have the rest of the process that is additional check at the build, package, deploy layer that can actually show us that we are adhering to all of our requirements of compliance, security, and we can block deployments if they are not. So these are the three steps that allow us to really get it right at the get-go and prevent these mistakes from happening. And this is another screenshot from the product that I think it resonates with customers because it shows you how a policy can look like when you merge all of these spaces together, when you de-silo them. Basically, we have one policy that you can enforce around, I'm not going to allow a container image with a critical vulnerability to be deployed to my environment. And I can start enforcing it in my code base, in my pipeline, and in the admission controller, in the deploy phase. So you can really have a consistent policy now implemented. And you can start with audit, and when time is right, you can move to block. So wrapping all of this, first, we understand that code and cloud are becoming same story more and more, the more we become cloud native. Every code impact has basically an impact downstream on our cloud. And second, in order to secure the cloud, we have to be thinking about the application as a whole, what we call horizontal security, and be able to basically secure it using a single scanner, single policy, so we can be consistent about how we treat risk at each phase. The third layer is that it allows us to be, horizontal security allows us to be much more effective when responding to risks that we found in the cloud, because we can pinpoint to the source. And the fourth is that we can instill guardrails that will make our developers ship better and better code. So these are the 4 steps of code security and how we get customers to become better and better in starting at the source. The next phase of the cloud security maturity model framework is actually around responding to threats. And we've seen the example of the PAN-OS vulnerability and why it's important to be able to reduce the risk, but also be on the guard and be able to detect and respond to threats in the cloud as they happen. And the problem is that today, most security operations teams operate in the cloud the same way they operated on-prem. They have plethora of tools with a lot of detection engineering tool. They develop their own detections. They develop their own collection for the logs from the cloud, logs from the runtime. They basically develop their own homegrown playbooks and response playbooks. And they don't have the right threat intelligence because cloud is a different beast than what we see on-prem. Different types of threats, different types of risks we need to look for. And actually, when we thought about how can we help it, we came up with WizDefend. WizDefend is the detection and response tool for the cloud. It basically builds on Wiz in the sense that it has all of the cloud context and the cloud threat intel that we already have in the platform, but then we augment it with all of the CSP, so the telemetry for your cloud environment. And when I mean cloud, I mean the broader sense of cloud, so cloud platform, Kubernetes, identity, all of these logs that you can pull from the orchestration layers. Second thing is that we are able to then layer in the runtime logs. So all of the logs coming from the runtime sensor, processes, traffic. And then we can actually analyze all of this together. And this actually helps us to achieve 2 really important goals. One, the ability to provide accurate detections by correlating all of the layers of the cloud, and also the ability to investigate and hunt effectively across cloud environments. And I want to take this and actually show you a few of the experience. We actually have it in 4 steps. The first one is really the ability to prepare your cloud today for the case of a threat. And in order to do this, you need to be able to enable all of the right flags, all of the right logs, all of the right backups. And we help you by actually establishing, we call it the incident readiness framework, where we analyze what should be enabled, what should be deployed, and then we can track progress and give you a score about each environment of how ready is it for the case of an incident. The second thing is that we are able to then detect both known and unknown threats. And we have created threat detection rules. So think about thousands of rules across different clouds, across the MITRE framework, across correlating different sources. And all of this is now offloaded from your detection engineering teams that can focus on very unique custom cases for your teams, but the general detection tool is now actually offloaded to WizDefend. And through this, we are able to detect threats in the environment. The threats are then exemplified with the new investigation graph. The investigation graph is a new way of investigating cloud threats. Basically, it allows us to layer on the graph the events and then signal anomalies, behavioral, threats that we know, anything, and then provide a timeline that really helps us analyze and explain to the analyst through AI and through really explaining each one of the activities, how should we interpret this in the context of cloud? Whether it comes from the runtime, whether it comes from the cloud, from the Kubernetes layer. And this timeline makes it 10x easier for analysts to really understand what's happening in their cloud environment. No more pivots in Splunk between cloud, sensor, runtime, Kubernetes. You can actually have all of this already correlated in a way that allows you to investigate and also hunt effectively. And with that, we can actually have recommendations enabled, so we can give you playbooks that are already written. So instead of each customer now developing their own response playbooks, they are mostly the same across the board. So how do I isolate a machine? How do I collect forensics? How do I do all of this out of the box using pre-built with response playbooks? So now we give them the tools to respond and contain. And the most important thing, at this reInvent, we actually launched on Monday Wiz Defend. So it's available in public preview for any Wiz customer. And you're more than welcome to also see a full demo at the booth. And we're very excited about this. I didn't mention, but this is a result of our GEM security acquisition that we've done earlier this year. And very happy to have it running, completely rebuilt from scratch on top of the Wiz platform. So fully integrated, and would love to show you more of this end-to-end demo. The last piece is really how did we break the silo, and we covered it in the session. In the end, where Wiz targets is to provide you one platform that will allow you to move, to transform to the cloud new, what we think, the cloud operating model that allows you to break the silos across code, pipeline, cloud, and runtime all together through one product. And with that, I'm really honored to invite a special guest, Brent Bauer, leads protection services at Siemens. Siemens is a long-term customer of Wiz, and we have a full case study, but Brent was kind enough to join us and tell his story from his perspective. So, Brent, take a seat.
Hello.
Thank you very much. And maybe we can start by really, if you can introduce yourself and tell us more about Siemens.
Okay, so my name is Bernd Bauer. I run the protection consulting services in Siemens. So I'm taking care of cloud security. That's one of my tasks among some other things that I do as well. Pardon me?
Oh, no, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you. So first, I think Siemens is really an amazing company, and working with you, I've learned so much about. It's fascinating to see how you adopt new technologies fast and also enable them to your organization. And I think maybe before we jump into security, can you share more about the digitalization process that Siemens is going through and how impactful it is, and maybe also which specific projects had the most impact on your leadership and employees?
So we have a very broad product portfolio. So we do digital industries that is helping automation, factories producing things. We have a smart infrastructure where we do building automation, also energy automation, and we have the mobility business where we provide trains infrastructure. One strategic thing in Siemens is that we connect the real and digital world. So most of our products are connected. And as we adopted technology, we also, in all the areas, we also adopted cloud. So we run a lot of things in the cloud, and we have a very broad, diverse portfolio, also a lot of acquisitions over the time. So it's a very complex environment with having over 300,000 people working for us.
That's amazing. It's fascinating to see how you continuously grow your portfolio and digital portfolio of products. And I think that cloud and cyber in general are essential, core to your strategy. And maybe if you can share a bit about more about the challenges you faced while instilling, transforming to cloud and cyber security, and how did you approach addressing these challenges?
Cloud is similar to AI today. Cloud was a couple of years, maybe a little bit more than a decade ago. And a new technology, we have a lot of very competent, creative people, and we didn't have so many rules at the beginning. So the adoption of cloud happened faster than we could write rules or control how it happened. And so we are facing an environment that is, was not really transparent. Or I work in the central cybersecurity department, so I try to provide an overall transparency of our security posture to different levels of management. But we could not do that because there were a lot of isolated solutions floating around. They were taking care of security, but not in a very efficient and holistic way. So that's what was a big challenge that we were facing.
How did you approach addressing it in general? What was your...
We are looking at the solution that can do more for us or provide us this transparency that we were looking at, and then we were looking in the market what tools were available, and then we found Wiz as one of the potential providers. And what was very important to us was that we have a capability to do agentless scanning to find the problems, because we have a lot of IT suppliers. Some infrastructures or environments are run by the businesses itself. We have a lot of stuff also outsourced, and deployment of agents was always a big challenge for us. That's why Wiz looked very attractive to us.
And we met like really early in the journey. I think the CNAP market just started. So as we said, really good in adopting new trends and technologies. And I think that if we go back, so CNAP just started and cloud consolidation, the agentless, and maybe if you can share a bit around what is exactly the way you use to transform your organization, especially as you have so many business units that you've mentioned that you had. How did you actually run a cloud security program that was actually be able to apply to each one of these business units and become effective at scale?
I believe the best way to bring something in a big company like ours is providing the value and convincing the people and not mandating it, because there are a lot of very competent people, and if they don't want to comply to things, it's very difficult to force them. So we set up a Cloud North Star program at the time, where we brought together cloud specialists from IT and from the businesses together to define the path forward, to define the requirements, what they need, and involve them in the process to roll out with. So we made them part of the journey before just doing it in a siloed ivory tower way and then say, here, that's what you get, live with it.
And how was the rollout and adoption when you just started leveraging the solution?
It was quite quick. We deployed very quickly. Like Inon said, we were early adopters. At that time, it was a technology bet. We didn't know that Wiz would develop in the way it did over the last years. And it was very easy to roll out. So within 6 months, we had 90% of our cloud workloads onboarded, and we could release after 3-4 months already like a beta version, the first glimpse on the solution. And yeah, it resulted in spiking of vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. Not that we created new ones, but all of a sudden we could see them. And then we had to come up with a task force to help them also remediating the business teams. So we provided central support and guidance. We supplemented the recommendation that came from Wiz with our own, and so we could drastically reduce it over a very short time, our risk exposure.
And I think one of the things that are really exciting in how Siemens adopted it is also the amount of engagement you get from the different business units and the active usage you have on the platform. As you mentioned, you basically brought all of the business units and they're becoming a part of the solution. Yeah,
they do. We have in average about 500 users on the platform every day, and 80% of them are not working for security. These are developers and people from the business that use the solution. So it has become an integral part of their daily work.
Yeah, and actually this is a great segue to talk about developers in general. And I think developers are also, of course, I think Siemens set a strategy to put the developers at the center. And I think more than just owning the infrastructure, developers have a key role in the application security and the code security that we've discussed today. And maybe if you can share a bit on your thoughts on the journey to cloud and application security together and what this will entail.
Okay, this matches quite well what you showed, the story. We started first with transparency, then we looked at the misconfiguration and the vulnerabilities, and it was more a reactive approach. But what we learned, I'm a strong believer in preventive control, so you do things the right way from the beginning, and then you don't need to fix the trouble later because it's much quicker and cost efficient. So what we did, for example, with all the observations, the problems we saw, we developed something that is called Guardrails. And it was a coincidence. We spoke yesterday about the new features, and that Wiz is also working now on Guardrails to prevent the problems in the first place. So we have, for different use cases, pre-configured cloud accounts that can be ordered through a central instance. And we learn from all the misconfigurations and problems in defining them. So we expect now, once that is implemented, that the amount of problems or misconfiguration will be drastically reduced. And also, we are following the same concept. We are currently running a POC on VS Code already, that we do that also for the code now, for infrastructure as code, application development, all these kind of things. We also want to start early, including API security, which we are also tackling. We have also thousands of APIs, and we're looking at it now. API is something that you didn't mention, but which is also on the roadmap to come. Yeah. And let's see what transparency we can create soon with that.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic partnership, I think, around also developing the API security visibility. And in general, I will say from a Wiz perspective, like seeing the journey that Siemens has taken, the structured approach into building not only the cloud security program, but then also building the guardrails that actually reduce, and you learn from every, let's say, finding how to become better and better at any time. This is something that is really admirable to see, the level of maturity. And once you get to the point where you can provide that cloud to code context to the developers, this really matures the program in a way that you can really become cloud native for real. So this is like amazing to see, and thank you for sharing this. And also, I think in terms of advice for the team, so Siemens is a huge organization, and you're, I would say, like from my perspective, very mature in your cloud security approach and implementation. And if you can share about the journey and learnings for industrial, but any organization basically, what are the most important key learnings we should take as we go about and mature the journey into cloud?
Today, it's, I think that this co-creation and involvement of the community that is going to be your users is very essential, because people take big pride in what they do. And when they build their own solution and you come with a central solution and you replace what they've done, it might cause resistance. Also, sometimes it's difficult to get exposed. You don't want to show your problems to somebody that is sitting in corporate or to your management, so you want to keep it as secret as possible. And that's why it's important to get the people on board to see the value that it helps them to become better, to be quicker, more prioritized in what they do. And that is one thing. And it's a journey. So you always start with the transparency, and then you take incremental steps, like we started with in 2022, and we came a long way in the meanwhile. And that was also due to the partnership, because we regularly have exchanges and we can give input and we're listened to. So a lot of things that we came up with were considered, not all of them, but many of them. And so we do incremental steps. You can't, the world was not invented in one day. It took a couple of days. So that's the way we took it. And then the thing what I mentioned with the preventive controls, that once you have the transparency and then you're trying to find ways to shift left and to avoid the problems in the beginning, in the very beginning.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate you sharing the story. I hope this is helpful, and I find it inspiring every time we meet to see that it's a continuous journey, and we continuously become better and better. And together, really, as you mentioned, like we're able to learn from customers like Siemens how to pave the way for many others following, and how to improve the platform, the capabilities to show API, code, and so on, in order to extend the outreach and the security posture. So with that, I really, really thank you, Bernd, for the story and sharing it, and for an amazing partnership. And for the audience, we have 15 minutes for questions, and I want to make it more intimate. So we will be here, we will end the official session, and then feel free to basically come and we can have a chat. So really, really thank you for joining. Come meet us at the booth, rank the session, and have a great reInvent and secure cloud. So thank you very much.